How's it going? So this is just going to be a short commentary talking through an Awakened Vardorvis skill. I'm also going to go over some of my best tips that have come to mind over doing a few KC. So for the gear setup, I'm basically just bringing max melee with Ultor Ring, no Bellator, even though it's best in slot, I just don't have one. Voidwaker is your best spec weapon here. I bring 2 super combats so that when I'm brewing, I always have enough super combat to make sure I'm potted. You can swap out these few anglers for some brews, do something like this. It doesn't really matter. I think I did something like this for my first KC. Something I will say is that if you're unable to do about 3 to 4 normal perfect Vardorvis kills in a row, you should probably still continue working on that before you move to the Awakened version, since pretty much all the mechanics transfer over aside from like just a few small things. But yeah, if you're able to do quite a few perfect normal Vardorvis in a row, you're, I would say, ready for the Awakened version. So on screen now, I'll go ahead and show all the plugins that I'm using during the Awakened Vardorvis fight. For highlighting Vardorvis himself, you can use NPC indicators, and then under NPCs to highlight, just enter Vardorvis. To change the range and mage attacks, to make it so they're a little bit easier to see, you can use Vardorvis projectiles. I have mine set to TOA. To highlight the axes, you can use Better NPC Highlight. Select True Tile and enter 12227 as the True Tile ID. And then to highlight the heads, which shoot the ranged mage attacks, I use Better NPC Highlight as well. Select Hull and enter 12226. This one just kind of helps make it a little bit easier to know when that attack is coming. Okay, so on to the actual fight itself. There's a few general tips to get out of the way. First off, you can go ahead and use your brews early on in the fight to make sure you have hard food and combo weeds for the very end. Every time you get hit below about 75 HP, you can just go ahead and brew. Probably the most important tip that I can give is do not miss an axe skip, especially not one off prayer. You can survive damage from basically anything else during this fight other than an off prayer axe hit. Knowing this, you should really not panic if you take big damage, since you should be sitting around 80 plus HP at all times, which will allow you to double or triple eat and be pretty comfy afterwards. You should also know that on occasion you will have to move and switch your prayer in the same tick. Something else to know is that if you miss a range or mage prayer, you will not be able to turn on your melee prayer in time, meaning that you will always tank a melee after a missed range or mage attack. Just eat up and be ready for the melee. Something I didn't mention earlier on in the fight is that I started the fight with only 1 Voidwaker instead of 2, so that I will guarantee to have 2 Voidwakers for the end of the fight, since I'm not using a Light Bearer, I'm using the Ultor. The biggest mistake I see people making during Awakened Vardorvis is getting way too greedy towards the end of the fight. The first 50% and even the first 75% really isn't that much different than the normal Vardorvis fight, but it's really that last 25% that's getting people killed. People will see him getting really low HP and start to realize that, oh shit, I'm like about to get it. And then they just start to greed for hits and they die. So during that last bit of the fight, you really have to play as defensive as possible and just focus on not dying rather than doing as much DPS as possible. And for some reason I always see people doing this with their Voidwaker specs in particular. They'll be trying to get 2 Voidwakers off in a row without having to like axe skip or something, and they just always die from that. Just again, make sure that you're playing as defensive as possible and just trying to take as little damage as you possibly can. And remember from earlier that if you do take an off prayer, range, or mage attack, it's not insta-death, like you're okay. You can take a couple of those honestly and be fine. It is the axes that are going to kill you. It's particularly an off-prayer axe. So this video's been played in the background basically the entire time, and I haven't really spoke about it directly at all. So as you saw there, I tried to skip the spike attack by going east 1 tile, which typically actually works, but on occasion you'll have situations like that where you walk straight into a spike. It's not too common, so I typically just continue to use that tile anyways, just because it's easy. Right around here, you'll see that I end up missing a prayer. I wasn't sure which one was coming first, and I just end up tanking both of them. And the reason I end up staying alive after that is because I don't panic, I eat up and continue to get the prayers following that correct, and prioritize skipping the axes when needed, and you're okay. That's really the situation where most people trying to get the first KC would have died. they would just start panicking, get too low HP, miss an axe, miss a prayer. But really, as long as you continue getting prayers right, etc. after that, you're okay. Here you can see I'm using those 2 Voidwakers that I saved for the very end, making sure that I'm continuing to pray and skip axes properly. And there we go. So a few things that I forgot to mention that I figured were important to add. When axe skipping to the northeast and you have the spike attack at the same time, you will actually move from the spike attack in time if you axe skip to the northeast properly. If you have game sounds on, the swinging sound of the axes happens at 1 game tick, and it takes 4 game ticks before you have to skip the axe in the southwest. So if you were on the northeast tile and you were trying to skip back to the standard attack tile going southwest, you can just count 4 ticks using the axe swings and click after 4 of them. I pretty much always do this and don't even really pay attention to if there is an axe in the southwest. This kind of just makes it a little bit easier. I'm sure most people know this, but you can get a free hit during the captcha attack by right-clicking him and attacking as soon as it happens. And the final tip I have is to always shift-click through Vardorvis when skipping going to the southwest, back to that standard attack tile I was talking about. Sometimes he will do the spike attack while you click to skip the axe, and you will click Vardorvis instead of the ground, making you tank the axe. So that's pretty much it. I may do some more guides in the future, unsure right now, but I do stream on Twitch and Kick occasionally. My Twitch is WarmUps OSRS, and the Kick is just WarmUps.